Sebastian, you're going to pop in and tell me. Okay. Hey, everybody. This is JVL from the Bulwark here with my colleagues, Joe Perticone, who is out in Chicago, and Andrew Egger, who is sitting in front of his liquor chest. No? Do I have that wrong, Andrew?
No, you're correct. I'm in my apartment.
Good for you. Good for you, sir. Guys, this is one of the more uneven convention nights I can remember, because up until about like 10:30, I was sitting there thinking, man, this thing blows. And then it just went to Oprah came on, was amazing. Wes Moore came on, was amazing. Pete Buttigieg came on, and then Tim Walz. I guess let's just, Joe, you're there. What do you think, man?
So yeah, like the crowd was having fun with Slick Willie when he came on. But then he was just so slow and lethargic that people weren't really into it. And something I noticed is that the stadium didn't fill up as fast as it did the previous two nights. So that might have had something to do with the energy. And the thing is that the first two nights there weren't enough entrances open, and so not people were like so crowded. And by the time they finally got in, whereas tonight, I think that people were taking their time. But then when I departed to be able to get here to have Wi-Fi, it looks like they actually opened it up more. And so we might have had a backfiring effect. Like people didn't show up till much later this time to like beat the bottleneck of the crowds. But I think that there's a lot of excitement there. There was the most packed the floor had been in a long time. The seats in the arena, though, different.
So let's start at the end and then work backwards. What did you make of Walz's speech?
I think he did exactly what a VP needs to do, which is just be fine, and then you're not a factor in people's voting choices. I think VPs are only a factor when they're bad, and he keeps being himself, being a common man kind of guy, keeping that shit going, and that's great. That's what he needs to do, and he hit it out of the park with that regard. He's not bringing people on board by being extra rah-rah. He just did a good job, and that's what he needs to do.
Andrew, what are your thoughts? I'm Joe is like super calm and like tiny bit cynical on this. I'm fully Walz-pilled. Where are you, Andrew Egger?
Yeah, no, and we should talk about this because our whole kind of masthead was so pro Josh Shapiro for the VP pick. Okay, not our whole masthead. Editorially, there was a lot of Shapiro kind of pushing from our point of view when it was an open question, when it was kind of down to those two guys, and they both spoke tonight. And Shapiro was good. I mean, he had a good speech. Yeah. He was on theme. He was very polished. I mean, he's a great speaker and everything. But I really do think. I mean, yes, like I totally concede that Joe is correct. The vice presidential pick only matters on the margins. There aren't a lot of people who jump back and forth, based on that thing. But a big part of the programming tonight was outreach to people who are not, culturally liberal, who are not, like California or Massachusetts Democrats,
or even urban.
Right, exactly. And I think, he's very, very genuine. I mean, he's just that guy who speaks to a different part of America. And I kind of rolled my eyes at this going in. I was like, oh, here come all of the coastal liberals to get all gaga-eyed over this guy from small town Nebraska because he has a twang. But I feel like I have to eat my words on some of that stuff because the more they go over his life story, the more he can speak with kind of authenticity and authority about the issues that are facing a lot of people in more rural America, and be able to kind of weave that back into the Democratic package. I think he is a really compelling antidote to the charge that Democrats are increasingly an upwardly mobile kind of coalition of the ascendant, coalition of affluent urbanites and suburbanites, and I think he knocked it out of the park tonight.
Yeah, so the reason I think I slightly disagree with you, Joe, is that the VP pick can help in ways that are tangential, right? You can't draw a straight line to it. You can't say, well, this VP guy did X, and so this state went in that way. But if part of the deal is, I mean, Biden's secret weapon was doing better with white working class voters, right? He shaved like 2 points, I think it was, from Trump's white working class numbers from 2016 to 2020. And a Walz pick, again, it's just so friendly culturally to rural America and white working class. I mean, in the vote, one of the videos they did on Walz where they talked to a bunch of like his army buddies, every single one of those dudes looked like a Trump voter. Right. I mean, like, all of the people who Walz, who were like his high school students and his army buddies. I mean, again, just they look like they were from the RVAT, Republican Voters Against Trump videos. And I don't know, like this is in our Slack, some Trump rapid response guy between like, oh, look at these silly Democrats who don't realize that they're cheering for somebody for winning shooting trophies. That kind of misses the point, right? This is a guy reorienting the party by saying, what was his line? I believe in the Second Amendment, but I believe our first job is to keep our kids safe. Like, I don't know. I just feel like that is a very, very winning frame, say, for gun reform. And I don't know, man. I thought it was really good. Yeah.
I think you're right on that. And I would say that if you paid attention to the full lead up of speakers, which I would bet not most viewers do, but a lot do, especially people who are undecided or, needing to check things out or feeling a need to get to know who this guy is. The types of speakers tonight were like ex-Republicans, were like Jeff Duncan, Olivia Troy, and it was ex-Republicans who had the family members of the Israeli hostages. And so all of these people were the kind of people talking about issues that would bring in that on the fence, maybe sort of conservative person. That was a huge theme. That's been a huge theme this week, is that there's been an outreach to draw more from the center and from the right than there has been. For example, there's no Palestinian speaker. There has not been. And in fact, right, about a dozen people were outside like protesting. But the fact that there's so few protesters and so the opposite direction, like, really shows you behind the Walz pick and just the lead up of speakers tonight. Like Oprah, universally loved person, pretty much. A lot of these new fresh faces like Wes Moore, who haven't been defined, who haven't been called a socialist 800 billion times in every TV commercial. A lot of the people here were either being introduced as friendly big tent people or were deliberately picked to kind of bring those people in. And I think that was just brilliant and spoke to the theme of the night.
So let me again, I'm going to play against type here by taking the super optimistic bull case on all this. Part of Trump's secret sauce is bringing in low propensity voters who are not traditionally aligned along partisan lines, right? And so he brings in people who don't like show up to vote for Republicans. They only show up to vote for him. And they do that largely along just sort of cultural vibesy stuff. I don't know if you're that, like, you're not going to get a Wall Street Journal reader is not going to watch this tonight and say, well, Jeff Duncan convinced me and Olivia Troy convinced me, and therefore I'm going to go. But I don't know, if you were just sort of a curious person who likes the celebrity aspect of Trump and is a low propensity, non-traditional voter, I think you may have looked at that and said, oh, those people aren't too far outside of my lane. Like you may have listened to Wes Moore and watched him Walz and the football, like a bunch of these overweight middle-aged dudes wearing their high school football jerseys. And again, I don't know. Maybe I'm totally wrong about this, but feels like this is an off ramp for a lot of those types of voters. Andrew,
So
no?
if you're going to give kind of the bull case there, let me just talk about the challenge, which is that the question is just how this information filters down, right? Because I mean, these are not necessarily people who pay a ton of attention to political news. They're not necessarily people who are tuning in to watch all this live. Because I agree. I mean, it's a very compelling package. I think to a less ideological voter. I mean, they were leaning very, very heavily into kind of like broad strokes. None of your damn business.
Faith and freedom.
Libertarian sounding. Exactly. Yeah. Embracing
Lots of Christian
American
stuff. The Lord God Almighty. Right?
Yeah. And even like kind of libertarian tinged sort of talking about policy. And I think a lot of that is hugely kind of like hits the pleasure centers of a lot of these kind of less plugged in, less lower propensity Trump voters. The question is, does this stuff ever even hit their eyeballs? Because the information silos are such for a lot of people consuming stuff on the internet right now that they don't necessarily see anything of Tim Walz tonight. They don't necessarily see the testimonials from his old football players or the track kid who talked about how he volunteered to coach the track team to earn a little extra money to help kids afford lunch. I mean, like any of these sorts of stories. I mean, it's very possible to have a curated media diet where instead all you end up seeing about Tim Walz is a clip where he talked about equating socialism with neighborliness, or some of the stuff that's bubbled up from Oppo research about his service record and things like that. So I do think, I think it will be an interesting case to see over the next couple of months is how much can you penetrate that bubble, because it is an incredibly compelling message. If it's possible to penetrate the bubble, I think this is the campaign to do it. So I think we will get to see whether it's possible or not over the next few months.
Yeah. Well, you can reach those people through Facebook, right? And Harris, we just saw today, raised $500 million in the last 4 weeks, which is astonishing. You can put those little testimonials from the dudes who look like Trump voters into Facebook, and you can get that stuff in front of low propensity voters pretty easily, I think. But who knows? You're right; those people weren't watching in massive droves tonight.
I was going to say that I did the focus group podcast today, which will come out later. And one of the things in the focus group, when you were talking to swing voters about Walz, was they kept mentioning that, he was a teacher, and he, like, they knew that people like on the right were mad that he provided free school lunches. Like, those were the stories about him that really penetrated, and those were the stories they were playing up tonight. So I think they know what's working. Like, no one mentioned the Fox News line about his service record. That just didn't register with people. The things that were breaking through were like his folksy stuff. And so when you look at the lineup, and if any clips from tonight permeate online, or people did tune in, like, that's the kind of stuff they're seeing. And they're not seeing the sort of negative things about him unless they're seeking it out or going to places that specifically traffic in that. Which is probably like a massive gain for the Harris campaign.
Yeah. I tell you what, that guy is absolutely comfortable in his own skin. That's the other thing. We've seen, I think it's safe to say so far this convention, most of the best speeches have come from non-professional politicians. They've been like the Michelle Obama speech, the Steve Kerr speech. Tonight, Oprah, we'll talk about the Oprah speech in a minute. I think of the actual professional political types, I think Walz has been the best we've seen. Would you guys agree or disagree? Have any of the political professionals so far performed better than him?
Obama.
Okay.
I think AOC was very good on night one. When Pete Buttigieg got up and spoke, I was like, that might have been the best speech so far. And then I think I agree that Walz, he had a lot more it was a more of a high wire act because he has a lot more on the line with it, and I thought he crushed it. Can I just bring up one more moment from the speech, which was like,
yeah,
his whole touchstone has been, you know, the joy thing, and again, like I come into all this as a guy who's been rolling my eyes some at some of this stuff, but when they cut to when he talked about, you know, their struggles to conceive their 2 kids, and then when they cut to their family and his like teenage son is like standing up and like crying and like applauding me. You have teenagers.
That's my dad.
Right.
That's
but like,
my dad.
I mean, if there's just this like attempt to kind of like appeal to like, you know, big dad energy out there. I mean, that is like so aspirational. My kids are 2 and 1. So it's like, you know, I hope someday, you know, my kids like me that much. You know what I mean? I found that very, very compelling too.
Yeah, it was something else. I'm Waltz pilled. There. All you people who've been yelling at me for the last month now. All right, I hope you're happy. I love him too. He's the best. Okay. So can we talk about Wes Moore and Pete Buttigieg? Because I felt like I was watching a presidential ticket from like 8 years in the future, maybe, or something. I don't know. I have seen Wes Moore just sort of do normal governor stuff. I'd never seen him do a quick set piece speech like this. And I thought it was one of the most impressive, just sort of political horseflesh things I've ever seen. Like part WWE, like absolute stone cold face promo, but part, you know, Baptist preacher, and part also like Ray Lewis style linebacker leading a, you know, pregame sermon. I don't know. I just looked at that guy and was like, oh, he's going to be president someday. Did either of you have that reaction?
A little bit. I think that Wes Moore.
Well, yeah, I'm like all hot, and you guys are like, I don't know, man. It was fine.
Is Joe still talking, or did he freeze for you too?
Is my Wi-Fi bad? Or
there, your Wi-Fi is not great, but that's okay. Roll with it.
My impression of Wes Moore was like, yes, he has the goods. I would not say the same thing of Mayor Pete. I'm not as sold on him as the rest of everyone else, but Wes Moore definitely like you said, like there's been clips of him, you know, engaging in like regular governor stuff where he's very much able to like command the crowd or like command people he's working with, and to see him do it in a very formal speech setting and be very comfortable. And so a thing that he's good at, that the Obamas, both Michelle and Barack, are really good at, is owning pauses. It takes a lot of confidence to pause in a speech and not be afraid of silence. That is something that is just super coveted in public speaking that not everybody has. And he was really good at that.
Yeah. And by the way, I totally agree. I mean, like it is not clear to me that Mayor Pete is ever going to be like a top 2, top 3, like presidential contender. I mean, I think like he has a little bit too much of the kind of Poindexter thing about him. And I thought, you know, just again, yeah, in terms of like political talent, I agree that Wes Moore, you know, has the inside track there. I just liked the speech from Pete. I mean, I just thought like the vision that he was articulating, you know, for
go ahead, do your George Will thing, Andrew.
Well, okay. I mean, he did I've never been a big George Will guy. George Will's a little bit before my time. You know, but
wash your mouth out, Andrew. I
didn't like his books about baseball. They were too dorky.
George effing Will.
Yeah. Sorry. But I mean, so the line that stood out to me, he was talking, and I guess he cribbed it from George Will, according to the people in our Slack, was talking about politics as soul craft. When he just said, you know, my faith teaches me, I'll just read it because I wrote it down. My faith teaches me that the world isn't made up of good people and bad people, but rather that each of us is capable of good and bad things. And I believe leaders matter because of what they bring out in each of us, the good or the bad. Right now, the other side is appealing to what is smallest within. He kind of went on from there. But the thing that I mean, we talked, you know, back at the Denver event we did a few months ago, we had like a little draft of like who should Kamala Harris pick as her vice president. Tim Walz, none of us picked him because he wasn't on the radar yet. I don't think. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But I had said that I liked Mayor Pete in there, and the reason was because like I do think there's this big political project that's coming, and it's okay, say you vanquish Trump, how do you kind of reel the other side back in a little bit? Like how do you like de-radicalize so many of these people who have gone so far for this guy? And I think that quote that I just read is such an insightful way of looking at what's happened to the Republican Party, where it's been this slow kind of like melting and this kind of deterioration of the individual souls of all of the people involved with this project, where they've made more and more moral compromises, you know, all along. And I think that looking at that in that way, where it's like not necessarily heroes, us, and villains, the MAGA voters, is going to be really important going forward. And so I just really appreciated that from Pete. Doesn't mean he's going to be president or anything like that, but I wanted to dwell on that moment from his speech a little bit.
You know, this is an interesting contrast. All night long, they talked, all the different speakers went out of their way to talk about how good the people who disagree with them are. And how, you know, I mean, Oprah had a line about, you know, if your house was on fire, your neighbor who votes for a different way than you is going to come over and help you. And that is a very real kind. So the bad guys, right? The bad guys were really like, it's Trump. The idea was it's the leaders who have led these people astray. That is not like the Republican view of the world, which we saw on display, was that like there are the good people in this country who are the silent majority, and then there are these other people who aren't real Americans, and they're the enemy, and we have to defeat them. It's just a radically different worldview between the two. Like one views it as a leadership problem, and the other views it as like a fifth column within the country of people who are not real Americans who are trying to eat the country from within. Did that strike either of you guys or no?
It strikes me every day. I mean, it's the main thing right now, right? I mean, it's crazy. Sorry, Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, like that, going to both conventions, like that was totally the theme for like at the RNC, there was the woke mind virus that's taking over our country, that's plaguing our children, wants to take your children from you, from their team. And this just hasn't been the case here. It's been like, come on in, like you're welcome, water's warm. And that's just an entirely different approach that again speaks to the theme of this week, is that they've been trying to rope in independents or maybe disaffected Republicans or just really anybody kind of outside who's just like, should I be involved?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a weird, I'm thinking back to Tucker's speech at the Republican convention, and maybe I'm misremembering this, but I feel like he had some version of like all of those people who vote for Joe Biden want to kill you and your family. I mean, maybe he didn't say it exactly like that, but it was kind of like where he was going. And it's just like, boy, our neighbors who've been voting for Donald Trump are such wonderful, good, salt of the earth people. And it's a crying shame they've been led astray by this con man. Wow. Okay. There we are.
Can I say one other thing on that, JBL, which is just that, and this is just one thing that was really kind of striking to me personally, because I think I have kind of gotten it in my head in recent months. And part of this is like, you know, just spending too much time on mainlining the discourse on the internet, spending too much time on Twitter and everything, and thinking that's real life. But like just having a lot of access to the people, the kind of like loudest Democratic posters and people like that who are like, absolutely not. We're done with this. When they go low, we go high bullshit. It doesn't work. Trump's eating our lunch. We got to like become the devil to beat the devil, that kind of thing. And it's been very off-putting to me. And like, I've been sort of, gosh, I hope this is not the direction that we're going. And I really do think that is primarily an online phenomenon. And I mean, it has not been in evidence at all in any of these speeches. I mean, Michelle didn't use that line or anything. They're throwing punches, they're throwing haymakers, but they're not like throwing every kind of political standard to the winds out there. And I found that reassuring to see.
Well, not just online, but like on the floor. Every person I talked to on the floor, I was like, oh, what do you think of these Republicans they're inviting to speak? They love it and they can't get enough of it. Like lifelong committed liberals.
The thing is, Andrew, that it is true that within the Democratic coalition, the online left is not the actual Democratic coalition. That's not true of the right. Right? I mean, J.D. Vance is the online right. And he's the Republican Party. Like, this is, I mean, again, it's just, we have this giant asymmetry. One more thing about Wes Moore before we move on. When he first walked out after Oprah, I was just like, boy, this poor guy coming out to follow Oprah Winfrey, who just gave this stem winder that electrified the crowd, and she was 2 seconds away from, and you get a democracy, and you get a democracy. And then the dude, the confidence he had to follow that's just ballsy. And again, points to me just looking at that and going, so that guy's got it. He's going to be president. All right, can we talk a little bit about Oprah and Bill Clinton? Because I threaded out something about boy, that was the worst Bill Clinton speech at a convention since 1988, which is when he, almost blew up his entire career, giving one of the worst convention speeches ever because people were falling asleep. And the libs were so mad at me. They were like, "Don't you understand? He's so old. It happens." And then Oprah comes out. Oprah is 70 years old, by the way. She looks 8 years younger than me, but she's 70. And just crushed it. Maybe your mileage varies. I don't know. What did you boys think of Oprah?
I mean, for me, it was a great speech. I mean, Oprah has always been kind of like a figure who is not, she's not for me. It's the kind of like the sort of broad spirituality, modern, Christianity tinged civic mindedness that kind of grinds my gears the wrong way. It was a great speech, though. It was. That sort of thing is actually very well suited to a Democratic convention that is trying to lean into faith more so than perhaps in the past. To talk about Bill, I was just really struck not just by Bill, but also to a slightly lesser degree to Nancy Pelosi, who also spoke tonight. I mean, this really is kind of a hinge point for the Democratic Party, right? This election, this convention, it was going to be Biden again. He's too old now. He can't do it. No more Biden. Bill Clinton, I don't know if he will speak. I mean, in a really prominent way again. He seemed so much older than he did 4 years ago. Hillary did fine. And Nancy Pelosi. I mean, she has stepped back. She obviously played a huge role in turning the page on Joe Biden just real recently. But she seemed quite old up there, and she's going to not be so much in public life anymore, as she's no longer in the top dog in the Democratic House. And I just think 4 years from now compared to 4 years ago, it's a very, very different looking Democratic Party. And I remember, a few years ago, there was a lot of hand wringing on the Democratic side about how thin the bench was and how where's all the young new talent? Where are all the people? Kind of like how it was when Tom Brady and Peyton Manning were getting really old. It's where are the hot new quarterbacks? Nobody's coming in to backfill them. And I just think that's one of the main overarching stories of this convention to me so far is the old people sputtering a little bit, and then these young, new, talented folks coming in to kind of fill that gap.
I would say that Nancy Pelosi is one of the most cunning and effective politicians in history. She's never been a good public speaker, and so I think that she was kind of on par with how she always is. Oprah, though, Andrew, you're too young. I used to watch Oprah all the time when I'd be sick home from school, and she is extremely good at taking over a moment, even when she'd be mid-interview with someone. She would just take it over in a way that's not controlling or off-putting, and it translates to a room of 20,000 people as well. She could just take it over, and so that's why she was so good and so impressive. And as good as so many politicians are at that, or some politicians are at that, she hasn't lost a step the way Slick Willie has.
Yeah, Yeah, and also one of the very effective things is that she said, I'm a registered independent. This registered independent's going to vote for. I mean, maybe our younger viewers don't remember this, but in 2000, she hosted on her show Al Gore on one show, and then George W. Bush on another show, and she was very friendly to Bush. She was very bipartisan. I mean, like she's from Chicago, or she lived not from Chicago, but she lives in Chicago. She's a black lady in entertainment, so you always understood her basic sympathies were more Democratic, but she was really open, and she was, and I think the Trump years have really pushed her to be like, we just have to say what the truth is here, that this is all really bad. And man, that speech of hers was something else. She's very, very good at this.
And she can shout and raise her voice without sounding angry, without sounding abrasive in any way.
Yeah.
And like so many politicians struggle with that.
Yeah, she
So
only
many.
feels powerful when she
Yeah.
does that. She doesn't feel cloying or threatening or anything like that.
And as an interviewer too, like when you watch her interviews, like she can elicit like really compelling responses without sounding abrasive or challenging. She's almost like a therapist, like, which is why she's the most successful talk show host ever.
Yeah. All right, we're going to wrap this up. But real quick, before we get out of here, I want to shout out to Jeff Duncan and Olivia Troy, who both spoke. Jeff Duncan had this great line where, again, this sort of fitting in with everything else we were talking about, said, you don't have to be a Democrat to vote for Kamala Harris. You just have to be a patriot. And I don't know, like, isn't that catnip? It was like I felt like in a lot of ways tonight was programming just for us at the Bulwark. It was like the Democratic Party being like, hey, we're going to put on 4 hours of content just to make the Bulwark types feel really, really special.
Yeah, they saw how grouchy Tim was on Monday night. They were like, I guess we gotta do more of the push the patriotism button a little harder.
Yeah. You know? So what did you guys think? Did the Jeff Duncan, Olivia Troy thing work for you guys as hard as it did for me?
I don't need to be worked, but I think that Duncan definitely worked. He had a huge impact in the room. People were really engaged and really excited about that. Towards the end of his speech, I like popped out of like the actual hall to go outside, and you could hear it, even people cheering for him on the inside. So he really knocked it out of the park. He also got a little bit more time than some of the other Republicans have that spoke.
Andrew, you get the last word, buddy.
Especially just to tee up, that video package that they ran right afterward on January 6th, and just hitting that visual again and again and again, because I kind of feel like, to me, January 6th is always like a little bit like the Grand Canyon. Like, we all kind of like know the facts of it, but when you are like physically presented once again with the actual experience of like consuming the video and the audio, it's like, oh my gosh, I had forgotten how insane, like just how gross and how just kind of dismaying the whole thing was. And so I think it's very, very compelling to put up somebody from Trump's own administration, put up a former elected official to say, look, we can't go along with this again. And here's why. Remember, just here's a quick reminder. You think you remember what this was like. You probably don't remember quite what this was like. And I think, the more Democrats can put that in front of people, the better a chance they're going to have with a lot of these independents and people who were really dismayed by January 6th at first, but who, the passage of time has kind of worn it away, and Trump has kind of renormalized himself in their minds. You kind of have to rattle those people time and time again.
All right, real last question. Does Harris get a bounce coming out of this convention? And if so, where do you set the over-under line for how many points?
This is the thing I'm the worst at. I honestly don't know. I think she came in, she got her bounce from the good vibes from picking Walz. It's possible she has like picked all of the like obvious candidates for the people who would ordinarily be a post-convention bounce already. They're already there. So I have no idea what to expect. The thing I wrote in the newsletter this morning was like, this is the kind of convention that would give you a bounce if there's still people left. I mean, the unity has been remarkable. There haven't really been sideshows. Even the protests have kind of very, very much faded into the background, which I think a lot of people expected were going to be a huge part of this whole thing. So I don't know whether to expect her to get another point or two. I think if she gets another point or two on top of all of the ground she has already made up, that'll be a real successful week for her.
Joe, set a line for me.
Totally agree with Andrew, but one thing I'd add is the ratings, the TV ratings and the online numbers have been massively bigger than they were for the RNC, which means people are interested.
Yeah, for day 2, the RNC did 14 million viewers, and for day 2, the Democrats did 20.
Yeah.
And the day 1 it was 18 million versus 20 million. So
yeah, and think of what tonight and even tomorrow, that's even more.
Tomorrow's going to be close to 30 million viewers for Kamala, I think. She'll probably end.
It'll be interesting to see what the numbers were for tonight, because I think tonight was the best night of programming so far, easily. And even with the Obama speaking yesterday, I mean, it's remarkable.
Yeah, I will set the line at 3 points. I think she's going to get a bounce, and I put the over-under at 3. If you wanted to take, I think 2.5 is a good number to take. Becomes a little bit harder to go all the way up to 3.5. That hook's tough. All right, Andrew, Joe, thank you for joining me. Everybody who is listening with us tonight, thank you guys as well. I'm just going to go dream sweet dreams about Coach Walz, who is the greatest VP pick in the history of VP picks, and who's now my favorite American. Good night, everybody. Catch you tomorrow.